Forging the bond that connects the real with the virtual at number 5 is Accesscode Talker, the ultimate evolved form of Decode Talker, one of Yusuka's ace monsters, with Accesscode representing Yusuka's growth throughout the V-Reigns anime, as well as his connection to AI. The original Decode Talker was used to represent Yusuka's cold and calculated nature as a character, as both of Decode Talker's effects are centered around using others for some kind of gain. Its first attack does this by gaining 500 attack for every monster it points to, while its second effect can protect your other cards from being targeted. In order to do so, you need to tribute a monster that you own that Decode Talker points to. And just like how in the anime, Yusuka was additionally willing to sacrifice AI in order to protect the Reigns, Accesscode Talker has similar effects to gain attack and use other monsters to gain an advantage. But because Accesscode is symbolic of Yusuka's growth, it actually represents something entirely different. Accesscode's first effect prevents your opponent from being able to activate cards and effects in response to both of Accesscode's other effects. Its second effect occurs whenever it's link summoned and lets you target a link monster that was used as one of the materials for itself, so that it can gain attack equal to the link rating of the monster times 1000. And last but not least, its third effect allows you to banish a link monster from your field or graveyard to destroy a card your opponent controls. This effect doesn't have any kind of once per turn, potentially letting you wipe away your opponent's field. But after you use the effect, you can't banish a link monster with the same attribute as one of the previously banished to use Accesscode Talker's effect, giving it like a quasi 6 per turn effect. In the competitive game, Accesscode Talker is used quite differently from its original counterpart. Because while Decode Talker was a generally decent utility tool in the early days of link summoning, Accesscode is a game closer, and one that's used to great effect in the modern era in just about any deck playing a robust link package, with Access being a great way of clearing your opponent's field so that you can either swing for game, or even over your opponent's high attack boss monsters. And this was precisely how it was used in the anime. In the final Duel of Reigns, where Yusuka had to face off against his once loyal friend and partner, AI, he had to stare down AI's The Arrival at Ignister, an unaffected tower that was gaining an absurd amount of attack due to Ignis that went into summoning it, as well as its own effect to gain 1000 attack for every card AI controlled. The Arrival is supposed to be the culmination of AI's efforts to preserve and save his AI friends, and showcase how much he cares for the Cyberse world, with the anime version of the Arrival being centered around trying to keep as many cards in the field as possible, because AI wasn't able to let go of the past. But it also represents that AI and Yusuka could be together. AI didn't want to throw away his partnership with Yusuka, he still cares for him after everything that's happened between them, which is why when Data Storm forms around them, AI offers Yusuka the chance to combine together as one. An offer that Yusuka refuses as he recalls the journey and bonds he's made and strengthened with his friends and enemies up to this point, and gains strength enough to summon Accesscode Talker while gaining 5000 attack from Dark Fluid. Yusuka then uses the effective Accesscode a total of 6 times, one for each attribute other than Divine, to represent both the Ignis and each one of the victims of the Hanoi Project, which is the experiment that created the Ignis in the first place and left Yusuka with a ton of unresolved childhood trauma. But even though Yusuka is banishing those monsters for cost, he isn't discarding the memories or bonds he made with the other victims of the project. He's instead letting go of his own trauma while realizing the importance of the bonds formed through his journey, with the ultimate culmination being Yusuka banishing Decode Talker, the card that represents his former self, in order to destroy AI's compromise as a rejection of AI's offer to become one being. This iconic moment is made even more striking when you realize both Accesscode and the Arrival essentially represent the same person, and both their boss monsters have a way to gain attack due to the bonds of their friends of different attributes, as well as ways to protect themselves, with the Arrival being unaffected and Accesscode being unrespondable. But Accesscode and the Arrival are 2 different cards, despite the similarity, just like how both Yusuka and AI have grown into 2 different people and can't become one. Despite them both being impacted and birthed from the Hanoi Project, with Accesscode showcasing Yusuka's desire to move on from his trauma and form new bonds, contrasting with AI's need to preserve his friends and reliance on the past. Both of these philosophies are put to the test when these 2 monsters battle. But both of their attacks are made to become equal by Gasari, and the 2 monsters subsequently end up destroying each other by battle, showing that neither Yusuka or AI are right or wrong. They're just different, and both their ideals are equally as important as each other. Now, while Accesscode Talker's use in the TCG is a lot less impactful than in the anime, it still carries Yusuka's philosophy with it into the decks it's played in. In order for Accesscode to be an important playmaker, it can't be used on its own, and is reliant on other link monsters to be strong, just like how Yusuka relied on his friends, with every new bond you make of a new attribute increasing Accesscode potential power and impact, which happens to make it an extremely strong player Cyberse decks that can link summon a ton of different link monsters of different attributes, with its most well-known partner being Update Jammer, who can allow Accesscode to attack twice in the game on its own with a boosted attack stat. Even though Accesscode's effects are quite different from Decode Talker, it actually works out to be a really nice metaphor for how far Yusuka has come from the first episode of Reigns, and how far he's willing to go to protect humanity, even if his partner has turned against him. And it's a really sweet way to show off how far Yusuke has managed to move on from the trauma of the Hanoi project and grow into his own person, with a newfound love of the people around the bonds he's made that's actually translated into the actual card game really well, with Accesscode being so reliant on other link monsters. And today's video is brought to you by Factor, which is a meal planning service that sends you complete meals. All you need to do is heat them up and they're pretty much good to go. And most importantly, they actually taste as good as they look, which is why I keep working with Factor as much as possible since I use it myself. Also, because I've been actively working out more, I've found that Factor meals make it easier to keep a variety of meals planned. With meal preference options like keto and vegetarian and over 27 meal options every week, you can find something suited for your goals. Thanks to the wholesome and nutritious meals provided by Factor, I've already dropped around 10 pounds thanks to not having to order so much fast food. My weight loss is also translating to improvements in my weightlifting as I recently hit the 200 max on the bench for the first time since high school. Fitness is something that starts with food, and Factor makes it possible for me to achieve my daily goals. Factor meals are an essential part of my routine, providing me with the food I need to accomplish my goals and the convenience to make it all happen in between work. If you want to give it a try, use my link or go to gofactor75.com and use code POGTDLJUDE50 for 50% off your first box. Once you click the link, my description will live update to count the purchases. Hit me up on Twitter when to give it a try and let me know what you think. And flying into number 4 is Simorgh, Bird of Sovereignty, who's actually the combined forms of Simorgh, Lord of the Storm, and Simorgh of Darkness, the evolutions of the original Simorgh and Dark Simorgh, who, after their sky battle, combined to form the Bird of Sovereignty. Other than the OG Simorgh, the entire Simorgh archetype revolves around punishing your opponent for using spells and traps to keep their spell and trap card zones clear, so the original Simorgh is guaranteed to deal 1,000 burn damage each end phase. Simorgh of Darkness does this by being able to directly negate and destroy the activated spell or trap, while Lord of the Storm instead lets you shuffle a card in the field into the deck whenever your opponent activates a spell or trap card. This pairs really well with Sovereignty, who provides the deck with a new reward for keeping the spell and trap card zones clear that happens to be a lot better than burning for 1,000 points of damage. Because, during the end phase, you can special summon out a winged beast monster from your deck whose level is equal to or lower than the number of unused spell and trap card zones on the field. But that's not all, because while Sovereignty is on the field, your opponent can't target it or winged beast monsters it points to with card effects, and if Sovereignty would be destroyed by battle, you can destroy any other Simorgh card you control instead. With the only trade-off being that you need to summon it using at least 2 monsters, with one being Winged Beast monster, and it can't be used as link material at all. This is actually a really neat payoff that echoes the effect of the original Simorgh while updating it for the modern era, and gave the deck a genuinely powerful payoff that had the potential to summoning almost any Winged Beast monster from your deck, so long as you keep both players' spell and trap card zones clear in some ways, echoing the ideas of the original Simorgh, but with a way better payoff with more unused zones giving you access to more powerful birds. Because the pool of Winged Beast monsters you could potentially pull from was astonishingly strong. If you managed to keep at least 7 spell and trap card zones clear, you could summon out Apex Avian directly from your deck for a free Omni Negate. Or if you had at least 4 spell trap card zones clear, you could bring out a Barrier Statue of the Stormwinds to lock your opponent out of special summoning entirely. This made Simorgh a boon in just about any deck that was capable of putting a Winged Beast monster on the field. Even decks that had important spells and trap cards like Tri-Brigade were willing to play Simorgh because on their first turn, your opponent can't play spell and trap cards in the field, guaranteeing at least 5 unused spell and trap card zones even if all of your zones were full, meaning that it's very likely to be able to bring out a Barrier Statue for free and win the game outright. And as long as you account for Simorgh's effect, it's very likely you'll have enough unused zones to summon out Apex Avian, which was common practice for decks that use Simorgh in order to play around board breakers like Evenly Matched that the deck would otherwise struggle to deal with. Sovereignty is a really neat evolution for the Simorgh archetype, and one that allowed for unused spell and trap card zones to be an important part of other decks, where it otherwise wouldn't have mattered, so these strategies could get access to the powerful payoffs it provided. The only issue was that Simorgh was too strong for how easy it was for some decks to access, which even led to it being put on the forbidden and limited lists. But for the time it was legal, Sovereignty was a really cool way of bringing Simorgh's themes to the modern day. And rocking into number 3 is Heavymetalfoes Electrumite, a powerful pendulum playmaker who's actually the combined forms of Metalfoes Silver and Gold Driver to form the ally of Electrum. Most of the Metalfoes main deck is made up of normal pendulum monsters that have an effect and scale to target a face-up card you control to destroy it to set a Metalfoes spell or trap directly from your deck. This can give you a ton of free advantage by either letting you set up your extra deck for a big pendulum summon if you destroy a monster card, or by letting you trigger the graveyard effects of your Metalfoes spell and trap cards. Essentially, the archetype loves to destroy each other in order to recreate and reform themselves. It's that metal. Electrumite carries this spirit with it by rewarding you for destroying your own cards. Whenever Electrumite is link summoned, you get to send a pendulum monster directly from your deck to your face-up extra deck. And on a soft once per turn, you can target another face-up card you control and destroy it to add a pendulum monster from your extra deck to your hand. And if a card happens to leave the pendulum zone, you get to draw a card for free, but this effect is a hard once per turn. And the best part is that Electrumite is generic, so it can be made with any 2 pendulum monsters. This was really important for Electrumite's playability, as it meant that just about any pendulum deck could play it. Which makes sense because Electrumite is from the Duel Overload, a set that contained a whole bunch of broken link monsters designed to help each mechanic survive Master Rule 4. And Electrumite supported pendulums incredibly well. Its first and second effects could be used in tandem to always guarantee access to any pendulum monster in the game, and weren't even hard once per turns, allowing you to use multiple Electrumites in a single turn to either set up your extra deck, or just search out any pendulums you could need. This was already strong, but was even stronger when paired with Astrograph Sorcerer. If you remember the Pendulum Evolution video, you'll remember that part of why Astrograph Sorcerer was so strong was because of how it synergized with Heavymetalfoes Electrumite. Because you could send Astrograph to the extra deck with Electrumite, and then use the effect of Electrumite to destroy a Pendulum skill to add the Astrograph to your hand. And then you could use the in-hand effect of Astrograph to special summon itself, and add a Pendulum skill from your deck to your hand while also drawing a card from Electrumite. This netted you a ton of free advantage while also setting up your extra deck for a Pendulum summon, which is why it was played in just about every Pendulum strategy capable of making Electrumite. Which is honestly really cool that the themes of destruction as a form of creation that are omnipresent in Metalfoes managed to be carried on in a ton of other Pendulum strategies that could use it to great effect. However, there was a form of destruction that even Electrumite wouldn't be able to recreate itself from: the ban list. And Electrumite would find itself there in 2020 in the TCG, where it's remained since, much to the sadness of every Pendulum pilot. But thanks to Master Duel, Electrumite manages to keep the spirit of Metalfoes alive to this day in just about every Pendulum deck capable of making it. And swimming into number 2 is Knightmare Mermaid, a representative of the Knightmare archetype, a series of corrupted link evolutions of the Mech Knight monsters after their cores have been extracted by Knightmare Corruptor Ibli. Now, just about every Knightmare could have made onto this list on their own merit, from the insane utility of Knightmare Unicorn to the absurd floodgate of Knightmare Griffin, and even the busted double normal summon of Knightmare Goblin, which made it the first link monster to ever be banned in the TCG. But Mermaid takes the cake for how splashable it made Orcus. You see, when Mermaid is link summoned, you can discard 1 card to special summon any Knightmare monster from your deck, and if it happened to be code-linked when you activate the effect, you get to draw a card for free. It even comes with a bonus effect reducing the attack and defense of all monsters by 1,000 unless they're code-linked. This effect is a sharp contrast to Indigo Eclipse, Mermaid's original counterpart, who has the Mech Knight summon condition to bring itself out from the hand into a column where 2 or more monsters exist, and at quick effect speed you can use Indigo Eclipse effects to move a Mech Knight monster you control to another one of your main monster zones. The reason why these effects are so different is because of the corruption of the Mech Knight cores that have been reshaped by Ibli to serve her evil desires, which has made the Mech Knights lose all sense of self and identity until they all become monsters whose only goal is to wreak havoc and obey her whims. Knightmare Mermaid is the best example of this in the archetype, since it's capable of heralding the 3 different versions of Ibli. Knightmare Corruptor Ibli, who tainted the Mech Knight cores in the first place, and Knightmare Incarnation Ibli, her ultimate form. And the most important monster Mermaid could summon, Orcus Knightmare, who happens to be the Ibli after having possessed Galatea, the Orcus automaton. At the cost of a single discard, you can summon out Orcus Knightmare from your deck, which allowed you to then link Orcus and Mermaid into Galatea. From there, you could use your graveyard effect of Orcus Knightmare and send Harp Horror from your deck to the graveyard and perform the full Orcus combo, letting you set up a Dengursu engrave with Orcus Babble Up, or even Orcus Crescendo, one of the most powerful Omni negates in the game. What makes this engine so noteworthy though was Knightmare Mermaid's summoning condition, since it's a link 1 that can use any Knightmare monster as its material. And all of the other Knightmares have really generic summoning conditions, with most of them letting you make them with 2 or more monsters with different names. Which means that if you can put the materials on the field for a single Knightmare Phoenix, just about any deck could have access to the entire Orcus combo, which in terms of lore is honestly pretty sad, because Longursu made Galatea as a way for his sister to be reborn into the world. But Knightmare Mermaid showcases how corruptible this doll is, with Ib's Vessel being the host for a number of different strategies, just like how it would soon become the host for the evil Fairy Lee. In terms of evolution, Knightmare Mermaid is a prime example of how evil can corrupt and turn even the most noble of heroes into monsters, and is a tragic end to the tale of most of the Mech Knights, who've lost their sense of self entirely after Ibli's corruption. And it translates the tragedy of Ibli's victory over the TCG really well, and allowed for the Orcus automaton to be used in a ton of different decks, which would eventually lead to Mermaid's ban. And making a splash at number 1 is Crystron Halqifibrax, the best link evolution in the game, who's a combination of every Crystron main deck tuner into one form. Quan, Creatine, and Ryan all have effects to summon out a non-tuner during your opponent's turn from either the hand, graveyard, or banish pile with their effects negated, so you can then immediately perform a synchro summon of a machine-type synchro monster during your opponent's turn. which pretty much sums up the main gimmick of the Crystrons, synchro summoning during your opponent's turn to use the powerful on-summon effects of the Crystron boss monsters. Halqifibrax is almost a one-to-one translation of these effects into Link form, but makes them a lot more generically usable. Halq can be made with any 2 monsters as long as one of them is a tuner, and when it's Link summoned you can summon out any level 3 or lower tuner monster from your hand or deck in defense position, rather than a non-tuner, and you can't activate the effects of that monster for the rest of the turn. And during your opponent's main or battle phase, you can banish Halqifibrax to special summon out any synchro tuner from your extra deck for free, while treating it as a synchro summon. Both of these effects are really cute references to Halq's original archetype, with its first effect being a stronger version of its 3 components, and its second effect showcasing the power of synchro summoning during your opponent's turn. But like many Link evolutions on this list, Halqifibrax did too good of a job conveying these themes and ideas, and as a result these effects were busted in just about any strategy that used tuners. Its first effect was a boon for synchro strategies, since it gave you access to a ton of different tuners such as the Red Rose Dragon engine, where after synchroing off Red Rose, you could summon out Rox Rose from your deck to add the Rose Dragon Reborn from your deck to your hand for a ton of free bodies. But Halq wasn't just an amazing tool for synchro summoning, because there weren't any restrictions on what you could use the tuner for, allowing you to link climb with it and Halq into any Link 3 you could want, with it most infamously being used to enable Halqadon, a combo centered around summoning out Despot 001 and Halqifibrax so you could then link summon into Mecha Phantom Beast Auroradon with the 2 machines. Then you could use the effect of Auroradon to summon out 3 machine tokens, which could trigger the graveyard effect of Despot 001, giving you a ton of free bodies you could use for synchro plays. Halq's second effect wasn't as well used as its first effect, especially during the time Halqadon was legal. But despite this, Halq's second effect was just as busted, and like the Crystrons that came before it, showcased the power of synchro summoning during your opponent's turn, because a lot of the tuner synchros Halqifibrax could summon also enabled a ton of powerful boss monsters with their on-summon effects, as well as their ability to synchro summon at quick effect speed. You could use Formula Synchron for a free draw, Desert Locust to hand rip, or TG Wonder Magician to pop your own set artifact Scythe. The 2 effects of Halq would work together in Punk Therion, one of the last decks that Halq saw play in before it was axed on the ban list. In this deck, Halq's first effect was used to summon out Jet Synchron from the deck, and then you would use Jet Synchron to synchro summon with Chaos Ruler to go into Hot Red Dragon Arcfiend Abyss, a level 9 synchro. Then you would use Jet Synchron's effect to summon itself from the graveyard to prepare for Halq's second effect, which you would then use on your opponent's turn to summon out Formula Synchron, who could then upgrade your Hot Red Dragon Arcfiend Abyss into Hot Red Dragon Arcfiend King Calamity, a card which, upon a successful synchro summon, prevents your opponent from being able to activate any cards or effects for the rest of the turn, basically skipping their entire turn. Which is actually really cute that one of the ways you could use this Link evolution was to promote the evolution of another boss monster. And Halq was used for more than even everything we just said here. Its general application was so incredibly strong that it saw play in hundreds of different strategies over the years, from Sword Soul to Infernoble and even Sky Striker. In a way, it's really cute that the theming of Crystrons was kept alive in so many different decks, and in so many different ways, with Halqifibrax carrying the spirit of this almost unused archetype with it to heights of competitive play until its eventual ban, which is why there's no doubt about it being the strongest Link evolution in the game, and one that does a solid job of keeping the spirit of Crystrons alive. Alright, and that's the list. If you know of any other evolutions we missed throughout the series, or have any ideas for future videos just like this one, please let us know down in the comments below. And remember to subscribe if you want to be kept up to date on future lists. Thanks for watching.